Good morning, everyone. I'm Celia and I'm an applied behavioral scientist. Today, I'm going to talk about how behavioral science can enhance e-commerce during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. But before starting, I'll briefly introduce myself. So, I studied a master's in behavioral science for management at the University of Stirling in the UK, and I'm currently based in Peru, where I work as behavioral science analyst at Heuristica. Heuristica is a research and strategic consulting firm that applies behavioral science to help private and public institutions to design better solutions. In the next 30 minutes, more or less, we're going to explore some behavioral insights that you can use to improve your online business, and especially how you can improve your customers' online experience. And the goal for you is to fully understand your customer experience so you can make more informed decisions about strategies, about context, positioning, and so on. So this the topic that we're going to talk about today is pretty much linked to the situation in which we are currently living in. In fact, we all know that we are living a very unusual situation and that we're constantly adapting ourselves to the new context. And especially our behaviors are drastically changing due to the coronavirus. And as we could see, the coronavirus is affecting almost every part of our lives, from the way we spend the time, from the way we spend our money, or even the priorities that now we have. And this is not only affecting us as people, but also it is affecting us as consumers. And how is it affecting us? Basically, what consumers are now doing is that they're shifting their behaviors from in-store shopping to online shopping. And why is it so? Of course, this is due to mainly two things. The first one is that a lot of stores were forced to close, and therefore people can't go there or purchase anything in that stores. And the second one is that a lot of governments have started to implement preventive measures such as social distancing, and always more and more people are trying to avoid going to supermarkets, for example, just to make sure that they don't get the disease. So they have these fears that make them less willing to go to public places. And due to these two reasons, more and more customers are starting or continuing to do shopping online. And of course, this is a very great opportunity for e-commerce, because more and more people are going online to supply whatever the customers need. And of course, this is also seen as a way to limit the harmful impact that coronavirus is having on the global economy. So before going to see how behavioral science can help e-commerce, what it is exactly. So what is behavioral science? Behavioral science is a discipline that combines psychology, economics, social sciences, neurosciences, and so on to fully understand how people make choices. So to understand their decision-making process and also the context in which they are making those decisions. And when applied, one of the definitions that we are currently using is behavioral design. So as we can see, everything around us has been designed by someone. And if you think about it, your customer's preference can change can change according to the way you present something to them. So you really have to be careful about it, because seemingly insignificant aspect of how you present something to your customers can influence their preferences, their perceptions, and their decisions. So what can you achieve by applying behavioral science into your online business? We can focus on 3 points. First of all, you will understand how your consumers actually make choice. The second point is that you will improve their online experience and influence their decision, hopefully in a positive way and ethically, because you don't just want to influence their decision, you actually want them to make better decisions for themselves. And finally, you will learn or see how to test and evaluate the most efficient solution for your business. So let's start with the first point. To understand how your consumers actually make choices, we're going to see what rational choice theory says about decision-making process and how behavioral science challenges this theory and introduce the concept of heuristics and cognitive biases. And then we're going to see what we mean by bounded rationality and choice overload. So let's start with the first point. So according to the standard economic model, human beings make decisions in order to maximize their own well-being or their utility. And to do so, they use all the information available to them and they process this information appropriately. But in standard economic model, we also assume that our preferences are constant over time and that decisions do not actually give importance to context, beliefs, emotions, the way things are presented to us, or what other people are doing. But in this way, if we think about it, it means that we are kind of all the more information that we have, the better is for us to make a decision, or the better decision we make. And we are also like supercomputers, or our minds are like supercomputers that can process all the information that we can get before making a decision. So if we think about it, the process or the decision-making process of a person might be a linear process. This is a simplified decision-making process, but it will help us understand why we actually deviate from the rational choice theory. So let's say that she's Sylvia. She's recognizing a need or a problem. So she's feeling hungry. She evaluates all the alternatives that she has in order to maximize her utility. In this case, she chooses pizza, which is the choice that maximizes her well-being. So she goes to the food delivery app and she's just trying to look for the pizza that she wants to buy. So her initial intention becomes a purchase decision. While she's scrolling down the app, she sees that there is a promotion from the pizza that she wants to buy, so it doesn't really affect her final decision, and she buys the pizza. But as we can see here, a lot of factors are missing that we should actually consider and that can actually influence our decision making. And this is what behavioral science takes into account. People use mental shortcuts to make decisions, which are known as heuristics. And most of the time, these heuristics work very well. So they help us actually to reduce the time that we spend on making a decision and also the mental effort to make a decision. And for example, if you are online and you want to buy something like a product, you might see that some brands comes to your mind very easily, and maybe you will buy a specific product just because it comes to your mind quickly and you don't even realize it. But in some cases, it can be very helpful because maybe you are deciding for that brand just because it has been in the market for a long time and then you really rely on it. But sometimes heuristics can lead us astray and they can lead us to cognitive biases, which are systematic errors in thinking that affects the decisions and the judgment that people make. In this sense, maybe you have been exposed to the ads of a specific brand and therefore we overestimate its value just because it comes very easily to our mind. So what happens to the customer decision-making process when we are included this factor? The path is not as smooth as predicted by the rational choice theory. So Sylvia is still recognizing that there is a need or a problem. So she's still feeling hungry. She evaluates the alternative that she has and she decides to have pizza. So she goes on the food delivery app to buy her pizza. And so while she's scrolling up and down the app, she sees that the pizza place doesn't have a lot of reviews and it doesn't really have a high score, a high rate. So she sees a very nice steak restaurant that instead has a lot of reviews with nice comments and a very high rate. Therefore, she decided to change her mind and buy pizza for the night, buy the steak for the night. What happened then? When she's going to buy the product, the app recommends her some other products that can go with her steak. In this case, they are recommended to have a bottle of wine. And what comes easily to her mind is that normally when she's at the restaurant, she takes steak and wine. Therefore, why not having wine tonight too? So her purchase decision at the end is steak and wine. But this is not her initial intention. Something happened in between because there is a big gap where a lot of heuristics and biases, or even internal external factor, are acting and influencing her decision making. So this really shows us how we actually deviate from what rational choice theories predicts. And why is it so? Because we are rationally bounded. This is a concept introduced by Herbert Simon, and rationality is bounded because there are limits to our thinking capacity, the information available to us, and the time that we have to actually process information. And of course, our processing capacity is limited because we are unable to focus on more than a few things at the same time. And as Herbert Simon said, a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. And we can see how our behaviors deviate from what rational choice theory predicts with the concept of choice overload. So choice overload refers to the difficulty of making a decision when too many choices are available to us. And a clear example here is Netflix. And I think it happened to everyone who has Netflix. So for example, tonight you want to watch something, and for example, a movie or a TV series, but you're not very sure about what you want to watch. So you go on Netflix and you just start scrolling up and down so many times and with so many titles, which are actually around 7,000, and you have no clue what you want. And of course, the presentation of a lot of alternatives can have mostly, of course, it can have more, but I want you to consider two important consequences that the presentation of a lot of choices or alternatives can have on your customers. So first of all, we have decision fatigue. So thinking or making a decision is actually very burdensome, and it actually takes a lot of thinking capacity. And because of that, after a long session of decision making, you can get very tired. And even if at first your customer are kind of analyzing and weighting all the alternatives that you present to them, at the end they might be so tired that they just go with the default option or the recommended option. And in the case of the Netflix example, after scrolling up and down for I don't know, half an hour, you just go on the top of the homepage where there is like the recommended movie or the recommended TV series, and you just go for it. And another consequence that is very important is analysis paralysis. So your customers might actually decide to avoid making a decision altogether. So they just bail out and they stop purchasing from your website or your app, which is a very a very like hard consequence for your business. So you actually have to consider it. And it's not only the motivation of choosing that decreases when facing a lot of alternatives, but it's also the overall satisfaction. So how can you overcome these problems, and how can you help your customers to overcome this problem? Of course, you can just reduce the alternatives that you offer your customers, but at the end, there are some behavioral insight that can help you to reduce, to tactically reduce the alternatives that your customer is processing before making a decision. And some of the behavioral insights that we're going to explore are specifically chunking, cognitive fluency and uncertainty, and social proof and scarcity. So let's start with chunking. Chunking refers to the strategy to break down the decision-making process into small chunks, maybe 3 or 4, to help your customers to easily navigate through your website or app. An example can be this one from the Apple website. So if you want to buy an iPad Pro, this is what you see at the beginning when you enter the page. And they just tell you what is the basic price that you can pay for it, and then there is the buy button. So if you really want to buy it, then you click on the button, and what you see is that they split the following decision that you have to make into 3 steps, and the 4th is that they show the final price that you're going to pay. So what they do here is to chunk your decision-making process, so it's easier for you to make a decision. And what they also do is that they require you to make an active choice, so to make an explicit choice for yourself. In this case, firstly, you have to choose what size of the iPad you prefer. So if you want the 11-inch display or the 11.9-inch display. And then the second step is to choose the color of the iPad. And the third step is to choose the memory size. And they finally show you the price that you're going to pay. But there is another concept that they're using here, which is the IKEA effect. So they make you develop or build the product by choosing this, by making this decision. And so by contributing in the development of the product, you increase also the value associated with the product itself increases for yourself. So you might be willing to pay the higher price that now you have to pay for it. And another concept to consider is cognitive fluency. So cognitive fluency refers to the ease or difficulty with which we process information. And this ease or difficulty not only refers to the experience of a task or instruction itself, but the feeling that people associate with the task. So, for example, something simple such as the text font can actually have a strong impact on how we process information, how easy or difficult it is to process information. And as we can see from these 2 different texts. And actually a study also found that the way we perceive the fluency of a statement, depending on the color that you use, how visible they are, and also the text font, might actually influence our judgment of the truth of the statement itself. So we might consider some information more like true just because it's easy for us to read them. And another concept is uncertainty. So uncertainty is a situation where your customer has incomplete or missing information. So this is a very bad feeling for them, because if they have too many questions when they enter your website or your app, they might actually decide to avoid making any purchase or any decision because they're just so uncertain about what they want or what they're going to do. So this is a concept that you should consider carefully. And actually, like for example, Booking.com, they realized that when their customers were entering the website and they wanted to book a hotel room, what they didn't know was if they had to pay already online, or if they were going to pay when they arrived at the hotel. And I'm sure this is something that happened to you, because it happened to me. And sometimes I was just trying to book a hotel room online, and I was like, do I pay now or do I pay later? And how did they resolve this problem, this uncertainty? They just used this sentence. They just said, don't worry, pressing this button won't charge you anything. Or in another case, they just made very clear that no payment was needed at that point. And this is actually a very easy way to address your customer questions and resolve a very easy problem that they might have and help them to improve their online experience. And the same thing did Netflix when they realized that one of the problem the customers were experiencing was commitment. So they wanted to buy the membership, but they also wanted to know when they can actually get rid of it. So what they did was making very clear that they can cancel at any time. And they also did it in the second page when you enter and start the membership payment. They say no commitment, cancel anytime. And so they're addressing the questions that the customers have, and also they're addressing it at the right time. And the last two concepts we're going to talk about are social proof and scarcity. So rationally, we might think that we don't actually give importance to what other people are doing. So that our preferences are the only one that we look at, and we don't consider if other people liked something or if they bought something before us. But if we actually think about it, I'm sure that it happened to you that sometimes you're just online and you don't really know if the product you want to buy, it fits you. So you go and you look at the reviews to see if people that bought it before you liked it. And you also look at the Net Promoter Score. And why do we do so? This is just because we're unsure about if we want to buy it or not, and if it's a good fit for us or not. So we just look at what other people liked before. But a study found out that it's not only what other people liked that actually influence our decision making, but it's also what others bought. And this is actually what Booking.com did in its website. They showed to their customers how many people booked the room before them. So they stayed booked 3 times in the last 6 hours. And not only so, but they also used the Net Promoter Score, saying also how many people reviewed the hotel. In this specific piece of website, they also use another concept, which is scarcity. And when an object or resource is less readily available, for example, due to limited quantity or time, we tend to perceive it as more valuable. And in this specific case, Google.com uses limited quantity. So they say that the room they're looking at is in high demand and only 3 rooms are left on their website. But what's very important to consider when using scarcity is that you can't use an invented, a made-up number, because you might face ethically problem in that case, because you just say something that is not true, and this just goes against you and your business. But if you actually say some true number, so you actually are providing your customers with this valuable information, this might actually help them to make their final decision. So if you're now considering to move online, or if you want to improve your online business, you should definitely consider to apply some of the behavioral science that we saw today, but also some others that you might encounter online. And what is important here is not just understanding the concept from behavioral science, but it's also experimenting the intervention that you want to implement in your website, so the solution that you're designing, before actually implementing them. This is because not every concept works for every business. So for example, something that works for Amazon doesn't mean that it works for you, because you might have different customers, and also the context in that they're making the decision might be completely different from Amazon's customers. So especially in this context that when we're living in, so with the coronavirus and the fact that a lot of people are now purchasing online, we always recommend to test and evaluate the most effective solution for your business. And we developed 4 simple steps that can help you to have a quick overview of what developing an experiment is. And normally in behavioral science, we use randomized controlled trials, which are very robust methods that help us to evaluate the different intervention. So if we consider this 4-step map, we can see that the first step is to explore. It means that you have to define the research questions and the hypothesis that you want to test. Here, the most important thing is to have very clear what is your outcome, because this is where you start to design your intervention. In fact, the second step is design. So you have to define the intervention to test, and it might be 2 or even more than 2, but you have to have clear what you want to test and how you want to test it. The third step is to implement. So implement the field, digital or laboratory experiment to identify what works best. And finally, you evaluate the results and the impact of your intervention just before implementing it. So before escalating it to your online business, you just see if it actually has an impact and a result on your business. By doing so, you can easily see what works for your business and what actually helping you and your customer to increase and improve their online experience. And so this is just the end of the talk, and I hope you enjoyed it, and that if you want to know more about it, if something is not clear or you want to have a deeper knowledge about it, just feel free to contact me and follow Heuristica in our social networks. Thank you so much.